In the name of Allah, we open the video. These sins are described as destructive, because they incur the doer's destruction with the consequences of their designated punishment in this worldly life, and being thrown into hellfire and deserving its torment in the hereafter. It was narrated on the authority of Aboo Hurayrah, may Allah be pleased with him, that the Prophet, peace be upon him, said, "Avoid the 7 destructive sins." People inquired, "O Allah's Messenger, peace be upon him, what are they?" He, peace be upon him, said, 1. To associate partners with Allah, exalted is He, in worship, and there are 2 categories of shirk, in other words, associating partners with Allah, exalted is He, in worship. First, associating partners with Him in worship, including stones, trees, and the like, of false objects of worship. Second, minor shirk, also known as hidden shirk, means riyā, in other words, showing off and seeking to impress others to win their praise. Riyā is an act of the heart and inward character trait that none knows except the one who knows the unseen. The second destructive sin is to practice sorcery, and it may be divided into 2 categories. First, sorcery by means of written spells and charms such as incantations and talismans, by which the sorcerer uses the devils to harm the affected person, but Allah, exalted is He, says, "What means? But they do not harm anyone through it except by permission of Allah." Second, sorcery by means of medicine and drugs that affect the person's body and mind, and influence his will and inclination, urging him to be inclined towards some things and developing an aversion towards others. The third destructive sin is killing a person whose life was deemed inviolable by Allah, exalted is He, except for a just cause, in other words, according to the Islamic Laws of Islam, and this applies to those people whose lives are declared inviolable due to being Muslims or being granted protection, example given the non-Muslims living under the Muslim rule, or a covenant of safety or security. His saying, "except for a just cause," means as per the laws of Islam provisions, such as killing someone in implementation of qisas, in other words, retribution, had, in other words, a corporal punishment prescribed by the Shari'ah, or for apostasy. The fourth destructive sin is the consumption of Ribaa, in other words, interest, usury, which means excess charged in the event of a barter of homogeneous commodities without being matched by an increase of compensation in return. Ribaa involves committing an act of injustice against the other party, unlawfully devouring his wealth, and waging war against Allah, exalted is He, and His Messenger, as stated in the Qur'an. The reference to consumption, the Arabic word used in the hadith is akal, lit. Eating, in this context is due to the fact that eating is one of the fundamental ways of availing oneself of one's money. The fifth destructive sin is devouring the orphan's wealth, which means wasting his or her wealth. The Arabic verb used in the hadith is akala, lit. To eat, and the reference to eating here is because buying sustenance is the often purpose of spending one's money. The sixth destructive sin is fleeing from the battlefield at the time of fighting against the disbelievers or Muslim aggressors, except when such a combatant flees merely for the purpose of maneuvering for battle, as a strategy or a stratagem of war, to relaunch another attack or deceive the enemy. Allah, exalted is He, says, "What means? Unless swerving, as a strategy, for war or joining another company." The seventh destructive sin is slandering chaste women, who are good believers and so innocent that they would never even think of anything undermining their chastity. Slander means accusing someone of fornication. Listing these 7 destructive sins in this hadith does not mean that they are the only grave sins. Rather, other textual evidence from the Qur'an and Sunnah have made mention of other grave sins including false speech, committing fornication with a neighbor's wife, undutifulness towards parents, false oaths, violating the sanctity of the house of Allah, exalted is He, and other grave sins that were mentioned in the texts of the Sunnah. The fact that the Prophet, peace be upon him, stated that there are 7 destructive sins does not essentially mean that there are no other destructive sins other than those mentioned in the hadith. He, peace be upon him, may have listed those 7 sins on that occasion, and received the divine revelation about other ones afterward, or it may be that these 7 sins in particular were the most appropriate on that specific occasion. For more religious instructions, please subscribe and activate the notifications button to reconnect with all our newcomers. (1) To associate partners with Allah, exalted is He, in worship. 2. To practice sorcery. 3. To kill a person whose life Allah has deemed inviolable except for a just cause, in other words, according to the Islamic laws of Islam. 4. To consume Ribaa, in other words, interest, usury. 5. To devour an orphan's wealth. 6. To flee from the battlefield at the time of fighting. 7. And to slander chaste women, who are good believers and never even think of anything undermining their chastity.